In the dim and hallowed silence of the Lahore Museum in Pakistan, there stands a statue that commands the breath to stop and compels every passerby to linger. If you were to glance only at the face, you would be certain you stood before Apollo of Greek mythology. It is a visage of flawless beauty, with a high straight nose, deep-set eyes heavy with contemplation, and flowing curls carved with meticulous care. The body ripples with solid muscle, a broad chest testifying to the peak physical power of a warrior who once conquered the battlefields of the West. Yet the true wonder reveals itself only when your gaze drifts lower. Those mighty shoulders do not bear the cold weight of iron armor, nor the crimson cloak of a general, but are draped loosely in soft monastic robes, with folds that flow as gracefully as water. Sinewy hands, once accustomed to the grip of spear and bronze shield, now rest gently upon one another in the gesture of meditation. Rugged legs that once marched across deserts and snowy peaks are now folded in the lotus position, as still and grounded as a mountain amidst the void. It is the image of the Buddha, yet possessing the form and spirit of a Greek god. This enigmatic figure poses a profound question to us, a mystery that has slumbered beneath the dust of time for over 2,000 years. What transpired more than 3 centuries before the Common Era in this land that served as the crossroads of civilizations? Why were the descendants of Alexander the Great's expeditionary force, warriors forged by iron discipline, the very first to sculpt the image of the Buddha? Why would men who worshipped physical might and reason bow their heads before a philosophy of compassion, selflessness, and surrender? History has recorded a mesmerizing, yet often forgotten chapter, known to scholars as Greco-Buddhism. It was a rare and beautiful moment in the human story, where the sharp, cold, and pragmatic logic of Western philosophy first encountered the boundless silence and spiritual depth of Eastern wisdom. This was not a clash of cultures, but a strange and wondrous union between reason and intuition, between the burning desire to conquer the external world and the deep need to understand the world within. In this space of tranquility, allow your mind to drift back against the current of time, returning to the moment when the campfires of the Greek legions illuminated the night sky along the banks of the Indus River. Together, we shall explore the turbulent psychological journey of soldiers far from home, men who laid down their swords, not in defeat, but to take up the torch of awakening. The story of how Greek warriors became the first guardians of the Dharma begins with that very encounter of destiny. Let us cast our minds back against the current of time to the year 326 BC. Picture a dusty, windswept afternoon on the banks of the majestic Indus River. Alexander the Great, the illustrious conqueror of the ancient world, had finally halted his march. After thousands of miles, after countless bloody battles stretching from Greece to the very edge of India, the army was utterly spent. When Alexander gave the order to withdraw, history usually speaks of his epic and tragic return. Yet, few pay attention to those who chose to remain. Thousands of Greek soldiers, men carrying the deep blue of the Mediterranean in their eyes, never went home. They chose to stay in this strange land, founding the kingdom of Bactria in the regions we now know as Afghanistan and Pakistan. Try to imagine the state of mind of these soldiers. They were history's greatest exiles. Cut off from their homeland, they lived adrift among cultures that were utterly alien to them. But far heavier than the burden of homesickness were the invisible wounds carved into their souls. These men had spent their entire youth in the art of slaughter. They had witnessed too much death, too much brutality, and too much loss. In the language of modern psychology, we would say they bore the heavy weight of post-traumatic stress disorder, night terrors, hypervigilance, and a profound emptiness once the sword was sheathed. This was the reality they faced every single day. It was within this confusion and pain that they encountered the earliest teachings of Buddhism. And this is where the story becomes truly fascinating and deeply human. Why would Western warriors, who worship physical might and the gods of Olympus, be drawn to the teachings of an Eastern sage regarding surrender and letting go? The answer lies in a strange resonance between two worlds of thought that seemed on the surface to be opposites. The Greeks already carried within them the seeds of Stoicism. They were taught that a man of substance must master his emotions, maintain composure in the face of adversity, and accept that which cannot be changed. When they heard the Dharma of the Buddha, they did not hear mystical prayers or elaborate rituals. Instead, they heard a practical form of psychological therapy. The Buddha spoke of suffering, of the roots of pain, and the path to end it. To a soldier wrestling with horrific memories, nirvana was not some distant paradise. It was a state of mind where the fires of anger, greed, and fear were finally extinguished. It was the absolute peace they so desperately craved. This encounter was not a conversion forced by power or the sword. It was a voluntary process of healing. These Greek warriors realized that the mastery of ego and desire, pursued by the philosophy of their homeland, was incredibly close to the Buddhist path. In the compassionate gaze of the very first statues of the Buddha, they found a comfort that Zeus or Ares could never provide. The god of war had only taught them how to conquer the enemy without. Buddhism taught them how to conquer the demons within, helping them make peace with their own blood-soaked pasts. And so, these soldiers of Bactria became not only the first Buddhists from the West, but also pioneers in the search for inner peace. They laid down their swords, not out of cowardice, but because they had discovered a new kind of strength, the strength of stillness and understanding. This is how those lost souls by the Indus River found their sanctuary, opening a silent yet profoundly deep chapter in the epic story of two great civilizations intertwining. In the eternal river of human history, there are encounters of destiny that have shifted entire paradigms, blurring the lines between East and West completely. Let us travel back in time to the 2nd century, before the Common Era, to the sun-drenched and wind-swept lands of northwest India. Here, the story of King Menander I, known as King Melinda, begins to unfold. Menander was not merely a warrior king with legendary conquests upon his steed. He was the embodiment of the finest Greek education, a man steeped in philosophy, skilled in debate, and forever thirsty for truth. In the mind of this king, everything in the world had to be explained by razor-sharp logic, by the clarity of Western thought. He had conversed with many sages, yet none could satisfy the burning questions about existence and meaning. That is, until he met the monk Nagasena. The dialogue between King Melinda and the sage Nagasena, recorded in the Milinda Panha, is one of the greatest philosophical masterpieces of humanity. It was not a simple religious debate, but a profound collision between Greek rationalism and deep Buddhist psychology. The pinnacle of this encounter is the classic allegory of the chariot. When the king asked who Nagasena was, the monk replied that Nagasena is merely a name, a designation, and that there is no fixed self or soul hidden behind that label. This answer went completely against the thinking of the king, who always believed there must be a subject, an ego controlling the body. To open the king's mind, Nagasena used the very image of the magnificent chariot the king was using. He asked the king, "Is the pole the chariot?" The king said no. He asked again, "Is the axle, the wheels, the frame, or the reins the chariot?" The king again answered no. Nagasena continued, "If we gather all those parts and leave them separate, do they form a chariot?" Naturally, the answer remained no. Only when all those parts are assembled in a specific structure, working together, does the designation of chariot appear. At this moment, the king experienced an awakening. Nagasena gently explained that a human being is exactly like that chariot. We assume we have a solid self, a distinct ego, but in reality, what we call I is just a gathering and constant movement of the body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and awareness. When these elements dissolve, the so-called I also ceases to exist, just as the concept of a chariot vanishes when the wheels and axle are taken apart. This was a profound shock to the logical mind of a Greek, yet simultaneously the key to opening the door of freedom. King Menander realized that his suffering, anxiety, and ambition all stem from his clinging to an illusory self. This enlightenment did not come from blind faith, but from a psychological analysis that was rigorous and scientific. The very things he worshipped. The result of this dialogue was a miraculous transformation. From a conquering king, Menander became a great protector of Buddhism. Historical records and ancient coins even depict him with the title of savior in the Buddhist style. Legend tells that he later abdicated the throne to enter the monastic life, eventually attaining the state of an arhat, becoming a sage completely liberated from all sorrow. The story of King Menander and Nagasena sends us a profound message. Wisdom and peace know no race, skin color, or geography. The truth about the workings of the mind remains one. When we can let go of prejudice and the prideful ego, we meet at a common point, which is understanding and compassion. The image of a Greek warrior becoming a Buddhist saint remains forever a beautiful testament to the intersection of cultures. In the endless river of history, there are encounters so strange they defy belief. Today, we step into a truly astonishing chapter where Heracles, the renowned demigod of Greek strength, found a new destiny beside the Buddha. This is a story about the transmutation of power, from the violence of conquest to the steadfastness of guardianship. Visualize standing before the ancient reliefs of Gandhara. In the center, we see the image of the Buddha, wearing an expression of absolute serenity. Yet standing tall right beside him is a muscular figure with wild curly hair, clutching a heavy club or a thunderbolt. If you are a lover of Western mythology, you will recognize him instantly as Heracles. However, in this Buddhist context, he has become Vajrapani, the holder of the thunderbolt, the first and most powerful protector in the history of Buddhism. The appearance of Heracles in this role was no accident. It was a reflection of the human consciousness of that era. Greek wanderers brought with them the baggage of their culture. In the mind of an ancient Greek, a saint or an enlightened being could not exist without protection. They could not conceive of goodness surviving safely in a chaotic world without the backing of muscle and weaponry. To them, the beauty of compassion required the shelter of might. And so, they invited their greatest hero to step into the temple. to stand humbly beside the Buddha, not to rule, but to serve as a faithful sentinel. The most fascinating aspect here lies not in the external appearance, but in the profound psychological shift regarding the meaning of strength. Previously, the gnarled wooden club and the lion skin were symbols of conquest, of glorious feats meant to assert the heroic ego. But upon entering the space of awakening, that strength changed in its very essence. It was no longer the energy of aggression or attack, but became the energy of protection and preservation. In the realm of psychology, we often speak of aggressive energy as a fundamental human instinct. If left uncontrolled, it is a fire that consumes everything. But the story of Heracles becoming a guardian offers us a different, more humane perspective. It teaches us that we need not reject the strength or the fury within us. Instead, we redirect the flow of that energy. Rather than using power to impose our will upon others, we use it to establish boundaries, to protect the peace within our own souls against the turbulence of life. The image of the muscular god standing silently beside the wise sage is a beautiful metaphor for inner balance. A healthy soul requires the softness of compassion, yet also the hardness of will. If we have only compassion without strength, we become fragile. Conversely, if we have only strength without wisdom, we risk becoming tyrants. Heracles, in the form of Vajrapani, reminds us that spiritual practice does not mean becoming passive or weak. On the contrary, it is the process of forging a will of steel, capable of cutting through all affliction and fear. The club in the hand of the guardian is no longer used to strike the bodies of enemies, but to shatter ignorance and laziness within the self. Those rippling muscles act as a symbol of ceaseless effort, of a fierce persistence in holding on to the values we have chosen. It is a form of silent strength, quiet but immovably solid. As we contemplate this strange union, we uncover a deep psychological lesson. It is that every energy within us can become sacred if placed in the right context. Hot-temperedness can be transformed into passion. Stubbornness can be transformed into determination. And the wild beast inside each of us can be tamed to become the most loyal guardian of our soul's garden. The night has grown deep, and perhaps the story of the Greek warrior donning the robes of a guardian has opened a gentle space for you to reflect on your own strength. Let this image accompany you into sleep as a reminder that you always possess enough power to protect your dreams and your peace in the most steady and serene way possible. Close your eyes and let your mind drift back to an era long ago, a time when Buddhism had already existed for centuries, yet not a single statue of the Buddha had ever been created. Throughout those long ages, the presence of the Enlightened One was only hinted at through reverent voids. The ancients believed that wisdom was too vast to be confined within the form of a mortal human, and so they only dared to carve footprints on stone, an empty throne, or the rustling branches of a Bodhi tree to signify that sacred presence. It was an expression of absolute humility before the invisible. But then, the tides of history brought the sons of Greece to the lands of Gandhara. They carried not only swords and spears, but also a completely different philosophy of aesthetics. To the Greeks, beauty was the pinnacle of truth, and the gods were meant to bear the most perfect human forms. They worshipped Apollo with his flowing curly hair and Zeus with his rippling muscles. In their worldview, if the divine existed, it had to be seen, it had to be touched, and it had to be beautiful enough to take one's breath away. It was right there that a quiet yet magnificent revolution took place in the world of art. For the first time in history, the invisible was made concrete. Greek artisans, or perhaps local craftsmen deeply influenced by them, picked up their chisels and carved the very first statues of the Buddha. You will see a combination so strange, it is stunning. The face of the Buddha here bears distinctly Western features, with a high, straight nose, a broad forehead, and hair cascading in great waves, recalling the robust beauty of the gods on Mount Olympus. Look closer at the attire. These are thick, flowing robes that drape softly and realistically. This is the masterful drapery technique of Greek sculpture, where the fabric seems to carry weight, hugging the body with dignity. The proportions are calculated according to the golden standards of the West, balanced and harmonious. Yet, the true miracle lies not in the outer shape, but in the eyes. Though the statue bears the form of a Greek god, the eyelids are half closed. This is the gaze of the East, a gaze that does not look outward to seek fame, but looks inward to find silence. This combination creates a profound sense of peace. The body is robust and grounded, but the spirit is transcendent, quiet, and deep. The art of Gandhara proves that physical beauty can powerfully serve the spiritual life. The Greeks taught the Buddhist world how to use beauty to lead the human soul toward truth. Thanks to these statues, abstract doctrines suddenly became intimate. People no longer had to imagine a formless void. They could look upon a specific face, a specific posture of compassion, to feel comforted and understood. That is the moment art ceases to be merely for viewing and becomes a bridge connecting the human to the divine, turning dry philosophy into a gentle resonance within the heart. Imagine that we are standing before the towering cliffs of Kandahar in modern-day Afghanistan. Time seems to have stood still upon the ancient stone tablets. These are the edicts of King Ashoka. What strikes anyone with awe is that the lines carved upon them are not only in the native tongue, but also in flawless Greek, the language of Plato and Aristotle. King Ashoka did not hesitate to use the language of former conquerors to speak of compassion. In these edicts, he declared that the practice of the Dharma had spread even to the kingdom of the Yonas, meaning the Greeks. He mentions the names of Greek kings in Egypt, Syria, and Macedonia as neighbors. This reveals that in the 3rd century before Christ, the Greek community were an intrinsic part of early Buddhist society. In this current of history, the name Dharma emerges as a vivid testament. According to the ancient chronicles, Dharma was a Greek monk. Picture a man with deep blue eyes, the color of the Aegean Sea, and the muscular build of a Western warrior, yet draped in the saffron robes of a Buddhist monastic. He was entrusted with the responsibility of leading a missionary delegation to Aparantaka, leading tens of thousands of monks. This demonstrates that ethnic boundaries had completely dissolved before the light of wisdom. This is truly a poetic irony of fate. Just a few generations prior, Dharmaraksita's ancestors had followed Alexander the Great, carrying the fearsome Sarissa pikes to conquer the world. Yet now, the descendants of those warriors had laid down their weapons. Instead of holding spears to take lives, they held alms bowls to nurture compassion. Instead of conquering lands, they turned inward to conquer their own minds. The shift from the image of a proud Greek soldier to a humble monk is one of the most beautiful psychological revolutions in human history. But the story does not end with the Greeks accepting Buddhism. When Greek soldiers and philosophers returned to the Mediterranean, they brought with them seeds of thought from the East. We can see glimmers of Buddhist philosophy in the skepticism of Pyrrho, who traveled with Alexander's army to India. Pyrrho proposed the concept of suspended judgment. This thought bears a striking resemblance to the doctrine of emptiness found in Buddhism. Is it possible that the lessons of suffering cross the Himalayas back to Athens, silently reshaping how humanity perceives happiness? History is often written in blood and battle, but beneath the dust of conflict, there are always undercurrents of understanding. The blue-eyed monks remind us that the yearning for inner peace is the universal language of humanity. And sometimes, the bravest warriors are not those who triumph on the battlefield, but those who dare to lay down the sword, to sit in stillness and look deeply within themselves. We have journeyed far together. Looking back through the dust of history, what remains of the once glorious Indo-Greek kingdoms? Cities have crumbled, and names are now but whispers. Yet, their legacy is not lost. It has dissolved into the flow of human culture, etched deeply into the very image of the Buddha we gaze upon today. Recall the image of the giant Buddhas of Bamiyan in Afghanistan. For 1,500 years, they stood tall, silent witnesses to the changing world. When those statues were destroyed, the whole world felt the pain of loss. But perhaps within the rising dust of that collapse, there lay a final and profound lesson on impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, not even mountain stone. Everything is born, exists, and returns to dust. Only spiritual values continue to echo. The story of this lost civilization reminds us that the boundaries humans draw are often merely illusions. We have a habit of dividing the world into East and West, war and peace. But the history of Gandhara proves that these opposites can indeed dance together. The sharp logic of Greek philosophy helped systematize Buddhist thought. The realism of Western art gave concrete form to Eastern meditation. They did not destroy each other, they completed each other. And this brings us back to the most important territory of all, your own inner world. Within every person exists a dialogue that mirrors this ancient history. We all have a Greek warrior inside us. That is the ambitious, logical, powerful part of us, Cs, always wanting to conquer challenges. But walking alongside that warrior, there is always a monk seeking peace, acceptance, and a quiet refuge. You do not need to make an extreme choice between these two selves. You do not need to kill the warrior to find peace, nor do you need to extinguish emotion to become rational. The lesson from the forgotten Greeks in India is one of synthesis. True peace comes not from denying a part of yourself, but from understanding and connection. Let the warrior within you lay down his shield, not out of defeat, but to rest. Let your sharp reason be softened by compassion. In that harmony, like the ancient statues bearing the smile of Apollo and the eyes of the Buddha, you will find your own eternal balance.